Please welcome to the stage Marissa Sackler, founder of nonprofit incubator BeeSpace, and Fast Company senior writer Chuck Salter.
Thanks so much. Marissa, thanks for being here.
My pleasure.
So what you guys just saw, that little snippet, that was a glimpse inside a different, it was an incubator, but it was a different kind of incubator. An incubator focused on nonprofits. That's what BeeSpace is. And I want to start, I feel like this is a thread kind of running through some of the conversations today. If you go back to Adi from House, how she started her organization, it really started with her own problem. And she started something to solve that problem. It feels like that's really the same thing that happened here.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I was consulting with early stage nonprofits. It had actually started, I had fell into Charity Water, which is an 8-year-old organization that sort of revolutionized the way that charity is done. In fact, their mission is not to bring clean drinking water, but that's what they do, but to redefine what charity is for a generation that had become very disenfranchised and very disillusioned with the idea of giving, which is obviously a big shift now in millennials. But working with these early stage organizations, there was so much potential, so much ability to go to scale if they could just get these sort of organizational building blocks in place that would allow them to build brands, be better storytellers, and connect more enthusiastically and authentically with their donors. But it just wasn't happening. It felt like I was banging my head against the wall, and these organizations with so much potential were just not fulfilling it. They were just chugging along in the status quo. And I thought there had to be a better way. There had to be a more holistic, a more comprehensive way of growing these organizations, and that's how BeeSpace came about. How could we give them a home and the strategic support to allow them to really finesse their product, their program, experiment, fail when necessarily, iterate and grow and really create the best product that they could and take that to scale?
Well, and I think the key word that I just heard was home, as opposed to like when you're trying to do this work as a consultant, you're the outsider coming in saying, here's what you guys need to do. As opposed to, here's an environment that you are bringing them into every day and they're interacting with one another. Like, tell us a little bit about what you saw in incubators that you thought applied and what you learned from visiting incubators while you were doing research to start BeeSpace.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're not a pure co-working space, but it's a hugely important part of what we do is creating a community. These organizations learn and grow side by side with my team as well. So I see them every day. I know what's going on with them personally, professionally, organizationally. And that's incredibly helpful, both for my team, but also for them. They really do support each other. It's a great environment for them to be in, and it's so much less isolating than sitting on your alone at your kitchen table, right. Where you just don't feel that same sense of there are other people going through this, and what can I learn from them? So I went to a lot of tech incubators. I went to fashion incubators. I went to every incubator you could think of in building out this model, and I did learn something from every single one.
Well, so what are a couple things that the best incubators do that you knew right away that's going to apply to nonprofits?
With the tech incubators, there were a lot of interesting things, but really putting a lot of the accelerators, like Y Combinators, put those operational building blocks in place. Like, you have to get that right if you're ever going to be able to do your programming well and to have the greatest impact. So we focus a lot on helping them do things like build a board, HR policies, building a team, making the right hire. How do you hire? How do you fire? These are all things that don't occur to most organizations or most first-time founders. Many of my founders are very young as 22. And then...
yeah, well, actually, why is that? Let me stop you there, because we talked about how nonprofits need to have like a mindset change, and even donors need to have a mindset change. What needs to change? Why aren't they focusing on, I guess, what sounds like kind of unsexy organizational infrastructure work?
Because they're punished for it.
How's that?
By donors. There's an idea that all nonprofits should run with an operations budget of 20% or less. No one knows where this number came from or how it started. But it means that nonprofits don't invest in their operations, in their teams, in their human capital, in leadership development, in infrastructure, and even in offices. And they do this because donors have been told time and time again that a nonprofit shouldn't have a higher operational budget than 20%. And it leads to very creative accounting on nonprofits' parts. I'll tell you now, almost every nonprofit is doing not illegal, but creative accounting in order to get under that magical 20%. And it means that they're just not having the impact they could. I strongly believe that you get good programming when you have good operations.
Well, and it sounds like part of the attraction for donors and part of the, I guess the appeal for also founders is the field work. And that's what they all want to be focusing on doing and delivering those results. And that, in a way, that becomes a distraction. And it's obvious kind of why it is, but it becomes a distraction instead of building a business that will be able to grow and sustain.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you don't start a nonprofit because you're going to make an enormous amount of money. You're actually barely going to make any money. You do it because you're an incredibly passionate person who's driven to fix this social issue. And so that's really, you know, these founders really do want to send as much money as humanly possible to the field and into their program. But it doesn't necessarily create the most impact. So we're trying to sort of sit them down and stop them and say, but, you know, if you only invested this much more, if you only hired one more person, your impact in the field could double, rather than just keep sending those dollars to the field without necessarily having the back-end support to create greater change.
Yeah, you were talking, we talked a little bit about the hiring challenge, and really that, you know, they need to get to the point where they're attracting the qualified enough talent to come in and have that longer term impact. And it hasn't really been happening because they don't have the funds to then attract those people.
Yeah, no, it's hard. Nonprofit salaries are not competitive. We're trying to change that. A bunch of other organizations at the forefront of the space are trying to change that. But, you know, especially for organizations that want to use technology in their model, that want to, Charity Water has its own peer-to-peer fundraising platform that it built 6 years ago, but really with the support of an incredibly generous tech donor. But they need engineers and designers to keep that platform going and to constantly reimagine it and get the most out of it. And they're competing for engineers with Google, with Facebook, with Twitter, and so it's becoming a little bit easier in that the generation that are coming up, millennials, truly do want to have social good as a part of their work, and they're willing to give up some part of their salary in order to have that fulfilled. But it is a challenge to really get the talent that you need.
Right. All right, so tell us a little bit about what's different about the nonprofits that are in BeeSpace. Like if we were to just pull up kind of the comparison of BeeSpace nonprofits and kind of the conventional nonprofits, what are the differences we would see?
Yeah, well, they work on a massive range of programming, everything from organ donation to global girls' education. They all have a few things in common. They all use storytelling to really connect with their donor database. They are all using online fundraising and technology to get the most revenue streams that they can. And I think they all have very clear brands. We use a lot of tech language at BeeSpace, and they are all brands. They're not just sort of a nonprofit with a horrible website that you can't navigate and is unappealing to you visually. We work really hard with them on website design, on brand, on logo, on how you tell your story as an organization, because it's a very crowded marketplace. There are over 1.4 million nonprofits in this country alone. And you have to stand out in the crowd.
Is brand kind of a dirty word in the nonprofit world because it sounds commercial?
I think brand's like a dirty word. In all sectors, brands become a bit of a dirty word. Yes, it's not talked about. Not really.
How do you get them to accept it?
By telling them they'll make more money.
Which leads to more programming, and they start to see the cycle.
Yeah, I mean, I think by constantly reinforcing that cycle, that if you have a clear brand, if you're clear about who you are and what you do, that will help you be more successful.
Okay, so tell us about a couple of these nonprofits that are in BeeSpace right now.
We have a group called the Adventure Project. They create jobs in the developing world that help raise communities out of poverty. They're about 3 years old. They're really all peer-to-peer and online fundraising. They've raised over $1 million that way. They've had 70% growth since they've been with us, which is phenomenal.
Yeah, wow.
And they have really creative campaigns. They sell They have a program in Haiti that makes clean-burning coal stoves. And every Christmas time, the holiday, little coal soaps, and they're beautifully packaged. They're great stocking stuffers. They have very witty little cards that come with them. And we helped them as they moved into our office last year to become featured on Upworthy. They sold out in an hour. And they were able to really double the size of their program in Haiti, which was fantastic. So we're really proud of them.
Wow. We're going to take questions in a minute, so think about what you might want to ask Marissa. I'm curious, one thing that we discussed was the kind of tech companies are really good at figuring out like how to get users to come back and to kind of develop the site or service as a regular habit. And this isn't something that nonprofits have really been as sophisticated about. I guess like donor conversion. Talk a little bit about what you think needs to happen there.
Yeah, donor conversion is tough. Well, almost no nonprofits are testing. So there's very little data about what makes people come back, what makes them give more. There are really very few organizations who are doing that. A lot of the bigger groups that are mainly for-profits like change.org are doing a lot of work around this. The current thinking is really how do you convert a one-time donor into a monthly donor? Because really that's going to be your big get. And Change is doing a lot of work around this. Mm-hmm. So if you put a pop-up that comes up when you're adding your one-time donation and say, for this amount once a month, you could be a monthly donor and have this much more impact. Mm-hmm. Will you sign up? There is a high conversion rate, but a lot of work still needs to be done. And again, organizations just don't have the money to do this kind of testing and to really to finesse that. So, but we're hoping that will change.
Well, and it sounds like they need to embrace it, but also that they then have to go convince donors. Like that's the other change that has to happen to make donors understand
donor education.
Your money is totally well spent helping us develop this part of the organization.
Yeah. And we don't necessarily want to split them. You don't want to say, oh, you're the smart donor who's giving to operations. Right. We want it to be seen as a holistic whole.
Mm-hmm. Right, that's just as valuable, yeah. Any questions for Marissa? Sorry, I can't see that well. All right, I'm going to throw one out. There are 130 applications for the next slot in the incubator. I think there are 5 nonprofits there now?
There are 5. We have 1 slot left.
Okay. How do you decide when someone is ready to graduate from the incubator, and how do you help an organization make that transition?
We have a couple of things in place that we're looking at all the time because we're learning as we're doing, and we're always open to changing. Currently, we say that when you hit 8 full-time employees, you exit out, or there's a hard stop at 2 years because we want to be part of the solution and not part of the problem, and we give them an enormous amount of support, but we want them to be ready to go out into the world and stand on their own 2 feet. And I think if you stay anywhere too long, you get a little too comfortable. So we're currently looking at strategic partnerships with a bunch of co-working spaces and other larger nonprofits that might have spare space to see if we can give them a sort of halfway house home as they exit out from us. And also using our network to help them have ongoing mentorship and advice. And we hope to create an alumni network that will keep coming back and mentoring younger social entrepreneurs in the space.
Great. I'm looking out to see if there's another question. If not, I'm going to keep going, trying to read everybody's minds. There's one. Nope. Sorry. One thing that I think is interesting is the whole notion of an incubator is to create this community. And you touched on it earlier about these organizations talk to one another. You have like a weekly meeting with the executive directors of these nonprofits. What are some of the benefits? What are some of the best practices that are shared among them in those weekly meetings?
Yeah, the weekly meeting with the executive directors every Tuesday, it's sort of a cross between a counseling session,
right.
strategic
because they're all going through the same
They're all
stuff,
going through the same thing, but it leads to all sorts of surprising end results. They share whatever challenges they're going through, whatever successes, what are the gaps in their operations right now, and what comes out of it is everything from what is the best fundraising platform that you're using to I need a chairman for my new board, and we've had one group find another group, and so but it's really I think what they would say is they get the most from is that support network, knowing that they're not alone. They're not the only one going through this. There are other people going through the same challenges in the same situation, even if they're working in a completely different vertical.
Well, and so then like when they graduate out to a different space, they actually aren't entirely alone because they do have that network that they've had for 2 years.
It's amazing the sense of community that's grown among them. They play basketball together. They go to events together, to conferences together. And we also try and foster that within the space. We have snack time every Friday. Last week I left the office, they were eating rice balls and discussing what was the failure you learned the most from. So we try and foster that kind of environment too.
And are you taking more applications for that 6th slot?
No, we've shut our application process.
Sorry, folks. We're done. We're done
130
right there.
were enough to read
I was going to say, that is enough to vet right there. Cool. All right, well, good luck deciding and picking the winner on those 130. And thanks for stopping by to talk to us today.
Thank you so much.
Okay.